You can't keep getting away with this, Jolt! I'll make sure you stop tampering with the timeline if it's the last thing I do!
Cool your jets, bro. This one isn't mine. Even I have standards.
What? This temporal disruption wasn't caused by you? Then who?
I've got a hunch. A theory, even.
No, it couldn't be. I ask that you please watch both parts of this video before passing judgment or commenting. This is not meant to be a personal attack on MatPat, and I am letting you know right now what you are about to watch is meant exclusively for entertainment and educational purposes. Before we begin, I want to make it clear why I am making this video. At the time of this video, MatPat only has 2 videos on the topic of Mega Man, and judging by their content, this is 2 videos too many. With all due respect, I used to actually be a fan of MatPat's work, and he served as an early inspiration for my own work, but I have noticed a trend within his videos that I find troubling, and that these videos seek to address. The interpretations of the Mega Man lore MatPat presents are what I would consider to be harmful in some cases, not just because he gets some of the facts wrong, but because of what he is imparting back onto his viewers and fans. MatPat is seen as an authority figure on video games. People go to him and automatically assume that he is telling them the truth, or that he has researched his videos well beforehand. But nothing could be farther from the truth in some cases. And while it's true, you could dismiss all of this and say, it's just harmless fun. Despite it being evident that he presents his videos as fact, I fear he is causing harm in another way, by teaching people ignorant and disingenuous ways of thinking. In many of his videos, he not only makes false claims with no pushback from an opposing side with counter-evidence, but he openly discards counter-evidence that he finds in order to better support his own theories, sometimes within his own videos. On top of this, he also employs extremely poor logic, which I believe has influenced an entire generation of viewers into turning off their critical thinking skills, whether it be blame-shifting, encouraging dismissal of opposing facts, or other unfair and disingenuous and toxic argument tactics. I firmly believe he has enough influence among his viewers to alter the way they handle disagreements and discussions online. If their favorite YouTuber, MatPat, is doing it, they will imitate his way of thinking, not realizing that he is mostly just making this stuff up for entertainment, with no actual respect or integrity for the source material, and is not meant to be taken as an actual method for presenting information. I've gotten enough people arguing with me, just parroting the things MatPat says with misplaced confidence, who then dismiss me when I push back with counterfacts, that I feel the time is right to pick apart this logic, bit by bit, so that hopefully this shady method of making baseless claims and dodging evidence will go the way of the dinosaur. Well, here we are. This one has been requested for a long time, so it seems that I'm not the only person in the Cronus Institute that is aware of these anomalies. Let's dig right in and see if we can't break this down piece by piece. This is gonna be a big one, so strap yourselves in. To start things off, we're going to cover the theory that Wily is actually the hero of the Mega Man universe, only to then cover a theory which claims that he was the true villain all along and wins in the end. If that doesn't make sense to you, get used to it, because there's going to be a lot of flipping and flopping on different stances, and even discarding evidence whenever it's convenient. Maybe this is why Game Theory has only ever really made 2 Mega Man focused videos, because there's a clear, well-documented history, lore, and internal logic involved, making it exceedingly difficult to fudge and lie your way through a crappy theory. But boy, he sure did try. All shade aside, I'm going to try and tackle each of these theories with as little bias as possible, and give credit where credit is due. I don't foresee that happening a lot though, so I guess just try to enjoy yourself as we drop a debunker buster bomb on these videos. Dr. Wily is not the true villain of the Mega Man Classic series. This claim is made on the basis of... oh no. Not this again!
Cultural stereotyping aside, though, Dr. Wily is the one to turn a legion of specialized work robots against humanity, so that would seem to make him pretty bad. But is all of this his fault? I used to think so until I saw this moment from the end of Mega Man 7. At the end of the game, surprise, surprise, Rock has Wily begging for mercy, but this time it's a little different. Mega's not having any of Wily's pleas. "I gonna do what I should have done years ago," he says.
Right away, this theory has one gigantic English localization team-sized hole in it. This ending that MatPat is using to form the basis of his theory simply does not exist in canon. For those who don't know, the English ending to Mega Man 7 is slightly different from the original Japanese. In both endings, Mega Man aims his buster at Wily and charges up to threaten Wily to make him surrender. Wily then reminds Mega Man that he is only a robot, and robots cannot harm human beings. This is a reference to Isaac Asimov's Laws of Robotics, which the intro to Mega Man X1 establishes are actual laws that robots must follow within the Mega Man universe. We won't get into all the specifics of them here, but the point is that it is illegal and potentially against Mega Man's programming to directly harm another human being, in this case, Dr. Wily. Here is where the two endings diverge. In Japan, Mega Man simply hesitates and sits there in frustrated silence as he fights with his own limitations. But before he can act on anything, one way or another, he is interrupted and the ending proceeds as usual. However, in the English version of the ending, during Mega Man's long pause, where he only has a string of ellipses in his word bubble, the English localization team spiced things up a bit by making Mega Man say, "I am more than a robot, die Wily," where it is then implied he would have indeed shot Dr. Wily, but is then interrupted by the base exploding as usual. The reason why the English ending is not considered canon is because it is not present in the original intended Japanese telling of the story. When a localization team reads the script for a video game, it's their job to translate the story, and tell it to you with as few alterations as possible. There's some leeway here and there by adding certain cultural or pop culture media changes between regions so that certain jokes or references can still make sense, but this is a humongous change. In one version of the story, Mega Man silently struggles with the good points raised by Dr. Wily, and in the other version of the story, Mega Man, a figurative 10-year-old boy, is about to vaporize an old man in a giant ball of plasma. Regardless of if you prefer this version over the other, it is not the job of the localization team to tell their own stories. It is their job to accurately tell the story given to them to an audience that doesn't speak the native language that it comes from. If they want to tell a story about a robot that grows beyond his limitations and takes violent revenge on his nemesis, make your own game, and don't alter the one that doesn't belong to you. Imagine if we took Sherlock Holmes, a British book series, regarded around the world as one of the best franchises ever written, and then we decided in the Japanese localizations of the book, at the end of his final confrontation with Moriarty, he was abducted by aliens and went to go solve mysteries with Gleep Corp, the radical 90s skateboarding alien. It sounds ridiculous, but that is effectively what has happened here. The original intention of the story has been replaced with a random person's input who has no authority on the canon of Sherlock Holmes, or in this case, Mega Man. If you wanted to, you could completely disregard the remaining 9 or so minutes left in MatPat's video on this much alone. The rest of his theory is seemingly reliant on this non-canon piece of information. But for the sake of giving his video a fair chance, let's continue.
Remember, robots behave in the way we program them, following a strict code based on the rules we put in. Asimov was a science fiction writer who created these laws as he explored the possible loopholes machines could find in their programming. Setting up airtight rules like these, where there is no possibility of a machine misinterpreting what we meant, is essential to avoid the prospect of a robot uprising a la Terminator 2. But based on the Mega Man 7 ending, it's clear that Rock wasn't programmed in a way that forces him to adhere to this sort of code. Instead, Instead, he has the ability to decide who lives or dies based on some arbitrary criteria. At first, I thought this meant he was broken, but in actuality, this was intentional, with these criteria programmed into him by one man, Dr. Light. And Dr. Light didn't just give Mega Man this ability. Every murderous robot rampaging through the city was the result of the good doctor. Yes. Everything filters back to Dr. Light. Every robot master, every Wily scheme, every life lost.
Yes? How about no? This is such an amazing reach that I'm surprised he didn't pull his arm out of his own socket during the attempt. Let's analyze what he is saying here. Because Mega Man does not follow the 3 laws of robotics, as shown in a non-canon altered ending, it means all of Dr. Light's robots do not follow the laws of robotics, and may therefore override them based on their own criteria and thought processes. Well, even if we assume that this is true, this argument falls apart immediately once you realize that Dr. Light did not create all of the robots in the world.
It's all Dr. Light's fault. If he never invented robots, none of this would ever have happened.
No way, airport security guy from the hit 90s cartoon show Mega Man produced by Ruby Spears Enterprises. That is a logical fallacy. Let's actually examine what happened. The story of Mega Man 1 is that Dr. Light's industrial robots were stolen and modified and reprogrammed by Dr. Wily to be used for combat. Right then and there, this claim falls apart, because Dr. Wily has tampered with the robots and altered them. Just because you hit someone in the head with a hammer, it doesn't make the hammer a weapon, you're just using it like one. The manufacturer isn't at fault for you intentionally using their tools wrong. It is very much likely that Dr. Light had programmed to follow the laws of robotics, or has similar such laws in place to prevent them from harming humans, just in case. But Dr. Wily has intentionally reprogrammed and repurposed them specifically for harm. Okay, so that covers the robots for Mega Man 1, but what about the rest of the games? Well, let's find out! Mega Man 2 follows Dr. Wily making his own robots to fight Mega Man with, so once again, Dr. Light is not to blame. Mega Man 3 also follows robots made by Dr. Wily and Dr. Light, which Wily then turned against Light as part of a double cross. Mega Man 4 features robots built by Dr. Cossack, who was blackmailed by Wily into doing his bidding, so once again, the programming of the robots cannot be blamed, let alone blaming it on Dr. Light when Cossack is the one who made them. Mega Man 5 also features robots created by Dr. Wily, so Light is not responsible once again. Mega Man 6 features yet more reprogrammed robots by Dr. Wily, who otherwise would not have been hostile, and in fact were made for peacekeeping. Mega Man 7's roster of robots is made up of yet more robot masters created by Dr. Wily. Mega Man 8 is a mix and match of robots created by Dr. Wily, or ones that were stolen from their normal jobs, such as an amusement park worker, a planetarium guide, and a waterworks manager, and once again, weaponized. Mega Man and Base is also comprised of mix and match robots, made specifically for combat, or were weaponized by King so that Dr. Light isn't even a factor in this game. Mega Man 9 once again features benign robots made by Dr. Light, which specifically had to be reprogrammed in order to fight, since it was impossible for them otherwise to join Wily, as told by the game itself. Mega Man 10 had robot masters who were under the influence of a computer virus, which made them become violent and betray their otherwise peaceful nature, once again due to Dr. Wily's meddling. And Mega Man 11 had a cast of robot masters who were similarly stolen and modified for combat, just like the others before them. Looking at this, I really do not think that anyone can pin the blame on Dr. Light for this. In every single instance, Dr. Wily was the one who instigated the aggression. He either created the robots with his own programming which could easily disregard the laws of robotics designed to protect humans, or he stole robots that otherwise were not dangerous and then made them dangerous. Even if you wanted to try to say that Dr. Light is responsible for all of this because he invented the Robot Master platform that all of these characters were based on, that doesn't make any sense either, and is really terrible logic. Henry Ford is widely regarded as the man who created the automobile industry in America, and is even sometimes credited as the inventor of the modern car. In that case, should we then be holding him responsible for every single case of vehicular manslaughter? Gunpowder was first invented in China for use in fireworks, where it eventually was innovated upon to create the first guns. Do we hold China responsible for every single firearm-related crime committed? Of course not. Just because someone invented a tool, it is not their fault if someone else uses that tool to then do bad things. Dr. Light created Robot Masters with the express intention of using them for industrial or helpful purposes. Dr. Wily is just the madman who took them, stuck guns all over them, and then started demanding to rule the world. Are you seriously telling me that Dr. Wily has absolutely no personal agency over his own actions? Are you saying that the allure of using robots for evil was just too obvious and too strong for Wily to ignore, and therefore Dr. Light is held responsible? MatPat is trying to play the irresponsible manufacturer card here, by claiming that Dr. Light made a dangerous product that is now hurting people, like making toys with lead-based paints in them, but is ignoring the fact that Light's products were intentionally tampered with to be more dangerous. On their own, there is no danger until Dr. Wily introduces it to the design. I've even seen this argument used on Dr. Kane, where people state that it's his fault the world of the X-Series is overrun by Mavericks, because if he simply hadn't created Reploids, there wouldn't be any Mavericks. Well, sure, if there's no Reploids, there's no Mavericks, but that's like saying if there were no humans, there would be no crime. While technically true, that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense in practice. Furthermore, only some Mavericks are due to them exercising their free will and choosing to engage in criminal behavior. What causes the other half of Mavericks, you ask? Either computer malfunctions in their electronic brain, or, you guessed it, Dr. Wily! Dr. Wily's fantastic final contribution to the world was a redo of the Robo-Enza virus from Mega Man 10, but supercharged to the extreme to affect Reploids in the future. Ordinary Reploids minding their own business may become exposed to the Maverick virus and make them become violent or even insane. But how did this virus spread around? Surprise! It's Dr. Wily again, who left us his final robot creation, Zero, who was a killing machine intended to finally destroy everything Dr. Light stood for, who was also a carrier of the virus. It's hard for me to blame Dr. Kane when he could not have realistically anticipated all of these traps laid by Dr. Wily over 100 years ago. It kinda seems like everywhere you go, if you just take a tiny bit of a closer look at the plot of the games, you can see that Dr. Wily was truly behind all of the pain and suffering in the end. I thought that much would be obvious for someone of MatPat's apparent reputation, but it would seem that he has no problem engaging in logical fallacies if it makes for a juicy video topic with no real merit. But hey, we still have some more to go, so let's keep on trucking. MatPat goes on to claim that Dr. Light created Proto Man who freaked out and ran away from home because he was made too independent. Therefore, to compensate, he went and made Rock and Roll. That's not exactly how it happened, but okay, sure. He also claims that Proto Man was a deadly, free-thinking robot that Dr. Light carelessly let get away, which could be harmful. Source? Proto Man has absolutely no weaponry. Proto Man, when he was first built, was just a humanoid body as a proof of concept that Robot Masters could work. In fact, Dr. Wily is the one who found Proto Man after he ran away and, you guessed it, modified Proto Man to have the Proto Buster, gave him the Proto Shield, and gave Proto Man his new, more powerful, albeit faulty, nuclear core. Perhaps MatPat is using the Archie comics as his source, where in that particular interpretation of the lore, Proto Man was developed as part of a military contract Dr. Light was roped into as a means to obtain funding to study intelligent robots, and therefore he gave Proto Man a buster to prove that he was making a combat robot, and not just using it as a cover story to develop AI. But unfortunately for MatPat, Archie Comics is its own separate continuity, and therefore irrelevant to discussing the game's continuity. So yes, Dr. Light let a completely unarmed robot with a faulty core that was draining of energy out into the wild because he probably figured he would one day return, or die on his own and be recovered in a harmless state. He then goes on to say that Dr. Wily was not as talented as Dr. Light, and thus could not create robots the same way that Dr. Light could. Not only is this completely disproven by Dr. Wily creating his own batch of robots in Mega Man 2, but I do not believe that there's any sources which state Dr. Wily was not as skilled in robotics as Dr. Light. In fact, the two seem to be portrayed on equal terms in most media. Mega Man 11, which admittedly came out after this theory video, would go on to show that Wily was very talented, but makes no comment whatsoever that he could not build AI on the same scale as Dr. Light. I suppose an argument could be made that Dr. Wily learned a lot of it from studying Light's first 6 robots, as well as Proto-Man, but this still feels like a claim that needs some backing up. Dr. Light himself, in Dr. Light's research journal, actually states that the only person skilled enough to modify his robot masters would have to be Dr. Wily. If anything, this seems like an endorsement from the man himself, stating that Dr. Wily could be considered on par with Dr. Light.
Robot uprising underway, Dr. Light, knowing that the world's police forces and armies wouldn't be able to combat these new enemies, converts Rock into the fighting robot, Mega Man. From that story, Dr. Light's responsibility for the events in the Mega Man series should become crystal man clear. He built robots that had cannons, bomb launchers, and giant scissors bolted to their bodies, then took it upon himself to give these machines autonomy. He willfully ignored conventions like Asimov's laws, and instead decided that these robots should have the equivalence of free will, despite neither he nor the world being equipped for what that free will entailed. He allowed Proto-Man, a deadly robot with no failsafes, no programming to say don't kill humans, to escape, and then did nothing about that other than build a few more. And all of this carelessness, this unwillingness to think about the consequences of his actions, allowed Dr. Wily to swoop in and use these robots for his own purposes.
No, no, and more no. You can't point to the flamethrowers, bombs, and scissors on Fireman, Bombman, and Cutman's bodies as weapons. Fireman was designed to incinerate trash. Incinerators for trash actually do exist, and flamethrowers are actually used in the real world to dispose of bee, hornet, and wasp hives. Yes, they could be used as weapons, but that's not what he was designed to be used for. Bombman does come equipped with a powerful bomb, but it's not meant to be a weapon. He was designed for demolition work. I don't know if you were aware, but buildings that are demolished are usually done with carefully placed explosives. Explosives actually have a large number of practical applications besides lobbing them like a grenade. Cutman is a deforestation robot. His scissors are made to chop down trees, not heads. I suppose chainsaws should be outlawed now because a maniac might get it in their head to take one and hurt someone with it. This isn't even touching on the other robot masters out of the initial 6, who all also have similarly practical uses for their abilities besides using them as weapons. MatPat is explicitly ignoring their intended usage and making it sound as though Light was somehow irresponsibly making robots with dangerous weapons attached to them. Rocket engines can be used to put people on the moon. They can also be used to launch intercontinental ballistic missiles. This is such a ridiculous twisting of intention that I am honestly shocked that not more people realize this. And all of this is predicated on the idea that Dr. Light created robots with absolutely no failsafes in them, which is false. The mere fact that all of the hostile robot masters in the series are hostile due to Dr. Wily tampering with them should be proof enough that whatever failsafes were in place have now been disabled. In fact, if you read the canon piece of media I mentioned just before, Dr. Light's research journal, Light even explains that after Wily took the robots, their failsafes against violent activity were overridden. And when he attempted to engage an emergency shutdown on the robot masters, it did not work, meaning Wily had disabled them both. Clearly, Dr. Light had considered the worst-case scenario to some degree, which Wily promptly circumvented the protections for. Let me repeat that. Dr. Light programmed them to not engage in violent and aggressive actions that might harm humans, and even added an emergency shutdown in them, which Dr. Wily then overrode and removed. You can't blame Dr. Light for a faulty or dangerous product when you intentionally remove their safety features.
Looking back at the Mega Man 9 example, those old robots faced with a rapidly approaching expiration date and the threat of becoming scrap in a junkyard chose to follow Dr. Wily, chose the possibility of a longer quote-unquote life. And why shouldn't they want to live longer if they can? This artificial intelligence Dr. Light gave them makes them practically human. Did they follow the wrong person? Maybe, but at the end of the day, it was their right to choose, as given to them by Dr. Light. Dr. Light, for as brilliant as he is, ultimately fails in the realm of robo-ethics, or the ethical considerations roboticists must keep in mind as they create newer, stronger, more autonomous robots.
Here, MatPat implies that the robots in Mega Man 9 chose to follow Dr. Wily to extend their lifespans. That much is true. It was indeed their choice. But, again, what he leaves out is that Dr. Wily then had to modify them to allow them to fight for him. If Wily were to have grabbed Tornado Man and made absolutely no changes, Tornado Man would not have been able to engage in any of Wily's orders, as they may endanger humans. So no, Dr. Light clearly accounted for the possibility that his robots may one day be given orders that would be dangerous, and therefore programmed into them a failsafe which would then make them reject such orders. Another problem is that throughout this video, MatPat has been making the claim that these Robot Masters have free will, but the fact of the matter is, they don't. Robot Masters do not have free will. If a Robot Master is programmed to do something, it will always do it. It may be displaying simulated emotions or simulated willingness or unwillingness to do certain tasks, but the bottom line is that none of it is real. It is all simulated. The result of all of their actions eventually boils down to how they were programmed. What is my proof of this? Mega Man X, of course. X is the first of a new generation of robot, made with the ability to think, feel, and make his own decisions. First. X is the first, meaning all robots beforehand, no matter how human, how sentient, how much free will it appears they may have had, it all eventually boils down to programming and simulated responses. There's definitely a little bit of wiggle room for their own personalities and preferences to flourish, but strictly speaking, it is all an emergent property of the programming involved and limited by said programming, as opposed to the unlimited potential laden within X, who has no such programming to tie him down, only pure, unfiltered consciousness. It should be noted, Robot Masters display an impressive degree of free will, but there were clear limitations of what they were able to do. Once again, in Dr. Light's research journal, he and Roll were having a conversation, in which Roll's brain froze up because she was attempting to contemplate her own existence, thus illustrating the limitations of her programming. Dr. Light then comments that someday he may be able to make an AI complex enough to handle such thoughts, and that could have true free will, unbound by the limitations of his own programming capabilities, but that doing so is currently beyond him. Dr. Light has created robots with as much free will as he is currently physically able to give them, as well as what he is currently legally able to provide. Hence, his programmed-in failsafes against harming humans. At the end of the day, Robot Masters are extremely advanced, and have a very wide range of free will, but are still ultimately limited by their programming. Those limitations may be vast and wide, and they may never once run up against them, but they exist nonetheless. The bottom line is that programmed-in, hard limitations on their ability to harm humans already exist, and they would need to be intentionally left out or overridden for Robot Masters to pose a threat to humans. MatPat implies Dr. Light is not willing to accept responsibility for the damages Wily caused, but if I really need to explain to you why Dr. Light shouldn't be held responsible for the actions of an entirely different person who is willfully bypassing safety measures to commit crimes, I can only explain it to you, not understand it for you. Dr. Light created the technology, which when used as intended is not harmful. This is true of literally everything ever invented. You could poke someone's eye out with a spoon if you really wanted, but that's clearly not how the utensil was intended to be used. Weaponizing a Robot Master is like sticking guns and saw blades onto your car. It's not the car manufacturer's fault that some crazy person decided to use their Ford Mustang as a death machine.
This thing is deadly. Overkill. And let me reiterate the first adjective I used to describe it. Autonomous. It can find a human and take out a human without needing to consult a human. No mercy and no regard for what side that person might be fighting for. Give this thing the ability to walk, drop it into a city, and you have yourself a ruthless killing machine with no morality outside of human-shaped figures die. And that is essentially what Dr. Light allowed to happen.
No, it isn't! The mental gymnastics on display here would get a perfect 10 if this were an Olympic sport. MatPat is describing an autonomous gun turret, which can automatically see targets, aim, and shoot them. Then he says if you give it the ability to move around, it would be able to hunt down and kill everything in its sight with no morality. Does he even realize how insane that sounds? First of all, nobody would do that. It would always have an off switch that is controlled by a human somewhere that is safe, unless Dr. Wily removes it. Not to mention, you would have to intentionally create a machine that moves on its own and has a gun that automatically shoots people. Anyone with half a brain would instead make one that doesn't do that. Or would create a badge or an ID system or something which the robot would be able to recognize and not shoot at anyone wearing those badges. I don't see how MatPat can go on one tangent and say that Dr. Light created robots that have free will, and then go on a completely different tangent and say that the robots are mindless killing machines that just destroy everything in their path. That doesn't make any sense. This is the opposite of what he just said. MatPat is even so bold as to say that this uncontrolled automatic killing machine is exactly what Dr. Light has done. Not a little bit, not slightly similar, but precisely what Dr. Light has done. That's just plain wrong. As I have already explained, Dr. Light created harmless robots intended for peaceful and industrial purposes, not robots made to be used as weapons. You could use a screwdriver as a weapon, but that doesn't make it one. Not only did Dr. Light put failsafes which would disallow harmful actions by his robots, but he also put in failsafes to disable them completely in the event of an emergency. And that's on his peaceful robots. For MatPat to claim that this ignorant and frankly stupid automatic killdozer is the same thing as what Dr. Light has done is frankly disingenuous and purposely misleading. But hey, it's just a theory, a game. No it isn't, MatPat. This is a hot load of garbage with your stamp of approval. In summary, your theory states that Dr. Light is responsible for the actions of an entirely different person misusing one of Dr. Light's inventions for evil. For this theory to be even remotely true, you would have to prove that Dr. Wily is without agency or responsibility for his own actions, and that the inventor of a product is responsible for other people's intentional misuse of it. You have done neither. All you've done is state logical fallacies and very poorly try to pin the blame on Dr. Light for the actions of a mad genius who adopted otherwise harmless and benevolent technology for something insane. We have seen this happen time and time again throughout history. An invention is not inherently evil, nor is the person who created it, but rather how that technology is used, and who is using it. Nuclear power was born from trying to create a superweapon to end World War II. Now it is an abundant energy source for the entire planet. Rockets were developed to be launched as explosives to destroy enemies at long distance, but they were also used to put humans on the moon, and maybe someday eventually to colonize space. Military tanks were born from farm tractors who had the ability to cross trenches and uneven terrain. It started off as a tool of agriculture, and was then used as a weapon of war with many modifications. The internet was created as a means of global communication and information sharing, but has been abused by hackers to engineer powerful cyber attacks which could cripple a country's resources and infrastructure. A rock is just a rock until it is picked up and thrown at someone. Then it becomes a weapon, instead of a wall, a dam, a fireplace, a road, or a building material. In that same way, a robot master is not inherently dangerous until the wrong person gets their hands on one, purposely develops it into a weapon, and then turns it on humanity. And if that should happen, the inventor of robot masters should not be held responsible for the insane, violent, and hostile actions of someone else, abusing and misusing his invention for vile purposes. This is a terrible theory, and a terrible lack of logic. And yet, the worst has yet to come. Stick around for part 2, when we find that MatPat has completely flipped his stance, and now even makes the complete opposite claim. Which one of his theories does he actually believe in? Neither, as far as I can tell. I'll see you guys then. Thank you to our top supporters: Kyle Dunn, Captain Fantastic, Jolt's biggest fan, NT Saud, Elusive Box, Super Terra, Anapan, Andrea Rutledge, Boss, Chimera Wendigo, Ditzy, Dugan, Exelin, Fabian Navarro, His One Nightmare, Isaac Otaku de Carnitas Diaz, Kiki Sylvie, Kurocodile, Megaspam X, May Saime, Maruna Stellar, Nesguy, Nova Poly Duo, Silby, and Darts.